Welcome to the Board Game Dojo's Import or Not series, where we review board games you can only buy abroad and tell you whether they're worth your hard-earned money. Yeah, that's good. Today, we are covering one of the buzziest games in Japan, Nana, a memory set collection game for 2 to 5 players. It's being called The Next Love Letter, a 2012 game that is now an international bestseller. The comparisons are pretty easy to make, with its tiny box size, easy to learn rules, and seemingly infinite replay ability. Now, usually being called The Next Love Letter is just a marketing thing, so I don't pay attention to it, but this one seems to be a little bit different.
Between the venerable Oink games, the innumerable amount of amazing trick takers, and the small box card games that make you wonder how such a small package can make your brain hurt so much, there is certainly no shortage of small box card games in a variety of genres and for many skill levels.
So when a small indie game breaks through the noise and sells out its first edition and the pre-orders of its second edition within a couple months of each other, people start to take notice. Could this small memory game really be the next big thing? And you know what? It just might be. To set up, first take out any cards you won't be using based on the number of players. For 4 or 5 player game, you'll be using all of the cards. For a 3 player game, you'll take out the 12s and use the rest of the deck. For a 2 player game, we recommend putting all the cards back in the box and playing a different game. Next, deal out the designated number of cards based on the player count. Put the remaining cards in the middle, face down, where everyone can see. Have everybody arrange their hands from smallest to biggest. Once everybody's done that, the person who most recently was the luckiest goes first. You win by collecting different sets of these numbers. The first way is to collect all 3 sevens. If you collect all 3 sevens, you win the game. The second way is by collecting 2 sets that either add or subtract the 7, such as 2 plus 5 or 10 minus 3. The third way to win the game is by simply collecting any combination of 3 sets. The first player to do any of those 3 things wins the game. So how do you collect these sets? Well, I'm so glad you asked. On your turn, you can do 3 things in any combination as many times as you can. The first is to flip a card in the middle. It can be any card from the middle. The second is to ask a person to play a card from their hand. The third is to play a card from your hand. You can keep going in any combination of these actions until one of 2 things happens. Either A, you succeed in completing 1 set, or B, you turn up 2 numbers that do not match. If the challenge is failed, then any cards flipped from the middle will go back to face down, and any cards that you ask somebody else to play, or you played yourself, will return back to the owner's hand. But here is where the interesting part comes in. When you ask somebody to play a card from their hand, you can only ask them to play either the highest or lowest card in their hand. When you play a card from your hand, you can either play the highest or lowest card from your hand. What this adds is a nice little clever touch, where you could have something like a complete set of 9s in your hand, but you cannot play them until you get rid of this 12. And just one small rule before we end this tutorial is that this is something that could absolutely happen, and is pretty common, where somebody has one of their highest cards or lowest cards, have multiples of them. If somebody asks you to play your highest card, you only play one of them. So in this case, even though I have 2 12s, if someone says, "Eric, please play your highest card," I would only play the 1. They need to ask me again to play my highest card in order for me to have to play both. Play will continue on clockwise while people succeed and fail their challenges until somebody meets one of the 3 end conditions, which again to review is either collecting all 3 sevens, collecting 2 sets of cards that either add or subtract to 7, or any combination of 3 sets. One of my favorite moments in gaming is when I'm teaching the rules to new people and they're nodding along, they're understanding, and then I get to a rule like you can only play the highest or lowest card from your hand. And in that moment, you see their face change, their eyes get big. In that moment of realization, that changes everything they're thinking about the game. It flips their expectations upside down. And in that moment, they're immediately strategizing. Okay, how can I make new use of that? And it does something that I think is so key to good family weight games, successful games like Too Many Cinderellas or Love Letter, and now Nana, is unlike the US version of The Office that everybody tells you you need to give it 2 seasons. What it allows people to do is it allows people to enjoy it from the very start. This mechanism also creates an interesting tension where you hope that the other players are doing somewhat well, but not well enough to win before you do. Let me give you an example of a very real hand that I had in one of our games. As you can see, I have 2 complete sets already of a 4 and an 11, with a 12 and a 3 on the sides. So, because 11 minus 4 is 7, I already have a winning hand. But I can't play it, because I need this 12 to be done, and I need some others to complete the 1, 2, and 3, so I can get rid of this 3. So I want others to complete those sets so that I can win, but I also need to keep track of them because I don't want them to win before I'm able to play my 11 and 4. Also, can we just talk about how good this art is? Saibeppu continues to prove herself as one of the best in the game and underrated, whether it's the Golden 7 or any of the other cards in the deck. These really set the tone for the light and accessible weight that it is. Also, can we just talk about how good the art is? Saibeppu continues to prove herself as one of the most underrated artists in the game, whether it's the Golden 7 or any number of these cards that have cute animals. It really sets the tone for the family weight, light, accessible game that it is. I also like that on the bottom of these cards, there's a link that shows what combination would give you the 2-card win, which I think really would help kids who maybe haven't learned their math yet, or as just a gentle reminder that in fact you can do a 2-card win instead of trying to just get the 7 or get any 3 sets. The price point I also think is right on the money, coming in at $16 US and about 15 euros. In fact, somebody we played with actually talked about that low price and this great art is the only reason anybody would buy the game, and any more money would be too much since you can get 90% of the same experience with a standard deck of playing cards. Wait, that didn't sound that positive. Hey, I thought this was going to be a positive review. That didn't sound positive. Oh no, don't tell me we're gonna do one of those review things where we start positive and then it goes into a whoa!
Mid-review turnaround. Beep, beep.
Okay, hear me out. We like this game, but A, it's not even available to import yet, and B, when it inevitably is, the best estimates put this at more than double its current retail price. And we just have a few hang-ups about the game that prevent us from outright recommending it as anything more than an add-on. It's mainly 2 things: inconsistency and value. Let's break it down. The first thing is inconsistency. Now this game bills itself as a strategic memory game, but we found that it's mostly luck. And that means that just by chance, you're going to have some bad games of this. What it means for this game is usually the winner feeling like their win was undeserved and the loser feeling like their loss was inevitable. Remember this hand that I showed you earlier where I started the game with basically a winning set where I had the 3 11s and the 3 4s? That was a 4-player game, and that game was over within 5 minutes. That left everybody else at the table feeling a little bit sour because I won without really even having to play the game, and that made me feel bad about it as well. That's just going to happen sometimes, even sometimes when somebody just has 2 of multiple cards, like 2 12s or 2 2s, where it just feels like the winner didn't have to play the game as much because they could just play mostly with what's in their hand, and the other players are meanwhile trying to ask the other players, try to flip over cards on the table, and having to remember more. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a criticism for some groups. It's just something to think about to know if it's right for your group. This was one of the few common complaints and questions that people had to the designer, and something that people thought might be tweaked in the second edition. But instead, in the second edition rulebook, there's just a section of FAQs where the designer just basically passive-aggressively said, okay, you can reshuffle if your group found it to be a problem, but if you continue to think it's just a problem, just kind of calm down. It's just a game. Which, whether you agree with that or not, is not the most professional way to respond to criticism. So, one of the fixes that I've seen people mostly play with is playing this in rounds, so that maybe if you have one bad round, then you play it a couple more times to balance it out. And that actually brings me to my next point. Playing it in rounds really did balance out the game for us. It made Nana an enjoyable game, one that I'm happy to have on my shelf. But the thing that differentiates a good game to a great... Now, playing it in rounds really balanced out the luck for us. It made Nana an enjoyable game, and a game that I'm happy to have in my collection. But the thing for us that differentiates a good card game from a great card game is often in its replay ability. Something that wants you coming back for more. So, take The Crew, for example, an excellent game in which you're working with everybody at the table to complete missions. Yes, this game has hands that you will be dealt in which it is mathematically impossible to win that mission. But A, it takes 1 or 2 minutes before you lose. But B, it is completely overshadowed by the hands that you have, where you complete with everybody else at the table a seemingly impossible challenge, a really difficult challenge in which at the end of that hand, at the end of that challenge, you have a sense of excitement, a sense of spirit together that you formed, and it keeps you wanting to complete the next one. Okay, let's just do one more mission, or let's just try that mission one more time. We were so close. Other games are really good at mitigating the luck in different ways. Tichu and Scout are 2 absolutely essential games for people's collection, we think. And this is because you can see how people get better at these games. Because yes, you might be dealt a hand that is not so good, but they both have a sense of a story arc with every hand you play. It's when is the best time to play those bad cards and when it's the good cards, or in the case of Tichu, when to play those special cards. In Scout, you can actually steal other people's good cards and add them to yours to make yours even better. So is it good to play your best cards early when somebody can steal it, or later in the game when people are less likely to? It adds a sense of, I want to come back and I want to get better at it. When we played these 3 games, it kept us thinking about them for days. When can I get back to that game? I want to do better at it. If we lost, it was deserved, but we were so close, we could do better next time. Whereas for Nana, it was an enjoyable experience, but at the end of the day, we felt that we had probably done the best we could and it didn't leave us wanting to come back to it. When we asked our friends what they thought of this game, it was pretty unanimous that after we started playing in rounds, that everybody found it an enjoyable experience, but they were also fine with never playing it again. Now I think that there's room in people's collection for a game that is pleasant, that is enjoyable. In fact, I give this one a 7 out of 10. But the big issue for us that keeps us from recommending it to you is that you can buy all 3 of these games for the same price as buying one of these. And the price, unfortunately, is the nail in the recommendation coffin for Nana. Card games are a saturated field, and part of that is because they're really fun and don't take up a lot of space, but a lot of it is also in the low barrier to entry in terms of price. Because of their low price, you can ultimately take a gamble on a game that might be good, but it might also be great, and you're out less money. Take 6 Nimmt, for example, a game that for some groups is just fine, for some groups is just too lucky, but for some groups is an absolute classic that will never leave their collection. This game cost me 900 yen. 900 yen is not much to take that risk, whereas Nana is more than 4 times that price. That is a much bigger risk to take. It reminds me a bit of Regicide, a game that came out in 2020 and gained a lot of popularity last year thanks to lots of positive reviews from content creators. For me, it was mostly So Very Wrong About Games, an excellent board game podcast if you're interested. The thing about Regicide is that you can play it with a standard deck of playing cards. So seeing that it was an extremely challenging cooperative card game, I wasn't sure how my game group was going to respond to it, so we started by learning the game and playing it with a standard deck of playing cards that we already had. And as you can see, we liked it well enough that we bought the version with the art. And ultimately, that's the method we recommend to you at home. Like I said, this game isn't even available to import yet anyway. So while you're waiting, why not play it with a deck of playing cards that you have sitting around at home? Just replace the 1s with aces and replace the 11s and 12s with jacks and queens, and you've got 90% of the same game. We even tried this with some of our gaming friends, and we got 90% of the same game. Yes, I missed Saibepu's art, but ultimately we had just as much fun with the deck of playing cards as we did with the version, with this version. So it's worth playing a few times, and if it's an absolute smash hit with your group, when this becomes available, which I'm sure will be pretty soon on Amazon Japan, then, hey, get this. But if not, you saved yourself 4,000 yen, which is an accomplishment in and of itself. That's smart shopping. So at the end of the day, we put this in the add-on category. If you're already shopping for games on Amazon Japan or Boldgate or Rakuten, and because this game is pretty small, won't add on to your shipping cost, hey, that's a good area for this game, I think. Our overall impression of the game was that it's easy to learn, very family friendly, the art is absolutely superb, and that mechanism of the highest or lowest is the only thing you can play is a clever little twist on a familiar card game. But ultimately, because of its inconsistency and just how high the price is, we can't outright recommend it. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us. Arigatou gozaimashita.